Well, it's great to be here, General Grunwald, Colonel Gibson, and distinguished guests. Glad to be with you today. Thanks for having Dawn and me participate in your association conference. I want to make sure, and this is for Marcy and Kevin and so on, I am a proud member of the Oregon National Guard Association and the National Guard Association of the United States, a life member. And I will tell you, all these years that I've served and everything I've done, I can tell you that without those associations, we would not be where we are today. We would not have anything. We would be a poorly funded state militia, and we are a great value and a great treasure to the United States of America. And so I strongly encourage everyone to be a member of the associations. It's very vital. Don and I have a lot of history together. He served as one of my platoon leaders back when I first joined the Oregon National Guard, and that was with when Charlie Company 2162 was in Corvallis, and that was in 1975 and 76. That was 50 years ago. 50 years ago. So I'm fortunate to be up on this stage, frankly. I appreciate that, but it was fortunate that Don and I had a great relationship, and it was a terrific one. I was fortunate to have many chiefs of staff that during my tours as the Adjutant General of Oregon, Norm Thompson, Herb Sims, Gary Allen, to name a few, and probably, frankly, there's probably only one or two people out here, maybe us up on the stage, and that's about it, who would remember any of these people. But none of them had a better grasp on the full-time workforce than Don, and I think you're going to appreciate all of his comments. To begin, I want to make a confession to you. I've got a hard time distinguishing between mentoring and leadership. Think about that. I have a hard time distinguishing between mentoring and leadership. From my earliest days as a cadet, it was drilled into me, and I fully accept it and I fully endorse the idea that a leader has a basic responsibility to take care of his soldiers and his airmen, and that included coaching them and helping them to perform better, both as a soldier and as an individual. So thankfully, one of our very best leaders in the Oregon Guard, Bob Tomasovic, who is sitting right over here, furnished me with some slides. And we're just going to zip through these, and you're going to have to read fast because I'm not going to dwell on the slides. I just want to kind of highlight these things. So if you look at the top of this first one, I think I've got the right one here. It's right in front of me. This is right out of the FM about mentorship. All right, I think it fits my personal belief and observation as a commissioned officer. This pretty much says that as far as the Army, and I would venture to say as far as the Air Force is concerned, leadership and mentorship are one and the same. Now let's now go to Bob's second slide, if we could. So you take a look at that, zip through that if you can, speed read it. So what's the difference? In a nutshell, I believe that a leader is obligated to be a mentor and at all those that are in his chain of authority during his time and position and in accordance with law and regulation. So a leader is a mentor just by the requirements of his role. But where this really splits is when two individuals voluntarily assume roles as mentor and mentee with little or no relationship to senior or subordinate roles. That relationship may or may not continue regardless of official positions that they may hold. So let's go to slide 3. So this one tells me this, and I personally would offer to Bob to change this slide a little bit, because I would say that the new heading would be the characteristics of a leader and mentor, and I would split this into two parts, Part A and Part B. Part A is really everything down to the last bullet. Everything down to the last bullet. Now this is pretty difficult. That last bullet is really kind of a third rail for leaders. All right, but if you're a volunteer mentor, it would be very difficult, in my estimation, for you not to be a show favoritism and so on, because that's a totally different outside the chain of command relationship. So now let's go to the last of Bob's slides. And this provides tips for those who are seeking a mentor. I think the bottom line here is don't be bashful. My experience has been that stepping forward and directly approaching the potential mentor is the very best way to create the relationship. If it's a senior-subordinate relationship, let them know what your aspirations are and that you would appreciate some of their time to coach you on your strengths and weaknesses and what you need to do to achieve your aspirational goal. If it's not a senior-subordinate relationship and it's a true voluntary mentorship, then you have to approach it differently in a more conversational, collegial fashion where you are asking this person to voluntarily share their wisdom and assistance in helping you find your way through your life's odyssey. So those are my opening comments, and we'll turn back to Colonel Gibson, please.
And now we'll turn it over to Colonel Wan for your opening remarks.
All right, thank you. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay. First of all, good morning. It's just a very distinct pleasure to be here this morning. As I mentioned to General Rees earlier, it's the first time I've been in this building probably in 13 years, and it looks just as gorgeous today as it did 13 years ago. And folks that are responsible for keeping this building up, I'd like to say thank you for doing that. There's a lot of history here. Anyway, but I just wanted to say thank you. My comments mostly are short. Most of you know me. I'm not long on words. I'm pretty much somewhat direct, I guess. But anyway, mentorship is essential for the growth of leaders and staff of organizations, regardless of it's a civilian agency, private industry, or in the military. Both parties, the mentor and the mentee, want to learn from each other. Mentees need to be open for advice and to expect feedback from their mentors to improve. In other words, mentors are sometimes considered a coach. Mentees need to be willing to give back to their experiences with others for their future growth also.
All right, so thank you. We do have some questions that were submitted ahead of time, and we'll kind of walk through those. Most of them are for the two of you. Some of them are individual, and then if we have time at the end, we'll take some questions from the floor as well. So the first question, and so I'll just preface this by saying, so obviously you both mentioned the amount of time you were in the military. You both started very young, and even for myself, the Army I served in today is not the same as the Army I joined. I'm not saying it's better or worse, it's certainly just different. So how did you apply your experience from a different time, a different Army and different National Guard, to current requirements for mentorship? Or maybe what principles of mentorship always hold true across that time? I'll let you
All right.
throw it out.
Okay. All right, well, my observation is this, that the basic principles of leadership and human psychology, I don't think ever change. I'm fond of saying that the purpose of life is to have a purpose. And regardless of the times or the culture, people want to know that they count for something, that they deserve to be treated with dignity, and that their leaders are going to give them meaningful and achievable direction. So leaders that can communicate and inspire their subordinates to achieve the mission and then reward them for their performance are going to be successful. So when I was first commissioned, it was the Vietnam era. The Army that I entered was culturally a holdover of World War II methodologies with faint echoes of every previous era before that. Clearly, what I just described, this business of having a purpose, what's the mission, why are we doing it, inspiring people, communicating with them, treating them with dignity, and so applied. But there was also, I'm going to tell you frankly, a coercive element to this whole thing also at that time. Remember, it was a mix of volunteers and draftees. It was truly a cross-section of the military-age demographic of the United States across the nation. The average age of the soldier in Vietnam was 19. Every post had a confinement facility. Every officer knew about the Uniform Code of Military Justice, the Manual for Courts Martial, and Non-Judicial Punishment, Article 15. Because of Vietnam, the Guard I entered was a mix of volunteers and folks seeking alternate service to active duty. There was no need for the Uniform Code of Military Justice or the Manual for Court Martial. People who didn't perform were either discharged or threatened with transfer to active duty. There were low expectations and soldiers performed accordingly. The Guard that I left in 2013 was the Guard that evolved since the late 1970s. All volunteers, standards were higher, deployments provided focus, and most importantly, raised confidence in the ranks that the Guard not only had a purpose, but we were damn good at that purpose. So what I'm trying to get across is, regardless of the era, basic leadership principles never change. Treat people with dignity, give them a purpose, reward their actions that they're performing for you every day. You will see that you will be successful. They adapted to those principles are adapted to the problem and to the era, but they basically say the same. Don?
Thank you, sir. It's been over 11 years since I retired from the Federal Technician Program, as stated a little earlier, and about 16 years from the military. And a great deal of changes have occurred during that period of time, some perhaps good and some perhaps not so good. I had the opportunity to work in the program as a dual status and a non-dual status employee, starting in the United States Property and Fiscal Office and working up through the Chief of Staff. Working with my counterparts from other states and National Guard Bureau, a common thread that I remember is that everyone wanted to do a good job with the resources they had available. And I still believe in the principles of loyalty, honesty, good moral character, teamwork, and more importantly, integrity, I believe still hold true today.
Thank you. And sort of a follow-up to that, as we think about generations that, everybody complains about sort of, today we might say kids these days, right? Like every generation sort of has its different thing. Has your approach to mentoring, as you've seen the next group of officers come up through the ranks, has that had to change or adjust at all?
I would say not really. Maybe tweaked, and more on my part than on the part of the mentees. As I've said in my opening remarks, leadership includes mentorship, but there's also mentorship apart from your assigned leader-subordinate role. And if there's something that I have learned, it's not that everyone is mentorable, or that there are limitations on my coaching ability or the mentee's ability to be coached by me. Simply put, you cannot put a square peg in a round hole. This is where you as a mentor need to find a way to steer or offer to steer the mentee in a more suitable direction. And this is very difficult. It's difficult to productively change a person's chosen purpose and aspiration and maintain their dignity and their self-confidence. A mentor is not the almighty, and mistakes will be made. Suffice it to say that mentees need to be afforded decision space to make up their own mind about what it is that they want to do and how they want to do it, and not to blindly follow the mentor's script. Thank you.
My approach toward mentorship has not really changed. I still look for the best characteristics in people, their integrity, honesty, character, leadership potential.
Thank you. So the next question is, what are the one or two pieces of guidance you end up giving most often? What are those principles you always go back to, or what are the most common pieces of advice or guidance that you give to a mentee that you over the years?
So I think this is really important for the officers and NCOs of the National Guard. Get your credentials in order as quickly as possible. This means get the prerequisite schools out of the way so that you can concentrate on your job performance and be ready for promotion. Now, many of you have heard me say this, so I beg your indulgence here. I want you to imagine that you're standing in front of the elevator of opportunity, and that door is going to open one of these days, and do you have your bags packed, and are you ready to go, and you're ready to step through that door? Because if you don't have those schools, if you don't have the credentials, the door is going to close, and you're going to have missed that opportunity. So you have got to take that personal effort to get these things out of the way, to get those credentials, whatever's required in the regulation, so that when you do have the opportunity, you can concentrate on the job, not on trying to, gee, I need to get another couple hours in to get this particular school out of the way or get sent to a school to do that. The second thing that I will always recommend is this business of listening to your subordinates. Listen to your subordinate officers, your subordinate non-commissioned officers, and actively seek out their thoughts and concerns. And I often use the term manage 2 levels down. If you're a company commander, what are the squad leaders saying? If you're a battalion commander, what's going on at the platoon level with the platoon leaders and the platoon sergeants? You're going to get a far better idea of the health of your organization. You're going to connect with the people who are making things work. And you're also going to have the opportunity to demonstrate to them that you care about them and you care about their contributions to the organization. So those are my 2 things: credentials and listening to your subordinates.
My thought is take care of yourself, your family, your integrity, and be true to yourself. Take advantage of opportunities to grow, learn, and treat others with respect. And I dovetail what General Rees' comment was on always be ready for that next opportunity. Your schools, those types of things that you need to do.
All right, thank you. The next one is related to what you said earlier, General Rees. So how did you, when you talk about sometimes finding that mentee who's maybe not mentorable, but this is sort of the opposite of that. How did you identify talent and mentor that talent for the leadership of the organization? So how did you manage that piece? And a little bit of overview on your intent process for managing talent.
So again, part of this is listening to subordinates, observing performance, really paying attention to these folks and their interpersonal skills. And number one, and I suppose another very, very important part is the genuine interest in the military, the genuine interest in soldiers and airmen and getting the job done. And the way I'd put it, phonies need not apply. All right? So from my perspective, and I think from the senior leadership perspective, you've got to take the long view. And as you're looking across all the potential out there, number one, you've got to keep the pipeline full. You've got to help them get qualified. You've got to work with them around their civilian and their full-time support career. And you've got to make sure that there's no doubt what their prerequisites are for achieving their potential. And if you're doing this and you're managing this and at the same time you are listening to those people, you are going to identify those people who are not the phonies, that really want to get on with it, get the job done, and do the best for the organization. And that will help you in talent management. Thank you.
Excuse me. Provide opportunities for personal growth to enhance their skill sets, both in and out of the organization. This could be both through military assignments and through a variety of technician positions.
All right, and then, General, as you alluded to this is what you alluded to earlier on your who's mentorable comments, but how do you approach those more difficult conversations, such as communicating to an officer that they have reached their potential, like, and that we're there now, right? This is what your career looks like.
It's a very difficult situation, and frankly, this is one of those things that I think is not to be done secondhand. This is really, if you're responsible to make a decision about somebody's career, what that they've reached their potential and so on, and you're the decision maker, you need to be able to face those people first, face to face, and tell them what this is a decision, why this decision has been made, and so on. In other words, treat them with dignity. Mm-hmm. This is a situation where many people have devoted 10, 15, 20, 30 years of their life to the Guard. They're dedicated to the organization. They've got many, many friends here. They're wonderful people. They have served their state and their nation well. And they need to be treated with the utmost dignity and respect. And you've got to assure them that they would be appropriately recognized and rewarded for their selfless service. And they are not a failure. It's just the system has got to move on, the system has got to function, and tough decisions have to be made. Thank you very much for your service, and thank you for what you've done for us.
This was always a very difficult conversation, as General Rees alluded to. Before I sat down with an individual to talk about their potential or they'd reached their potential, naturally I would do some background check, read through OERs, get input from other senior officers. And at the time, and I'm not sure if they still have this process today, but look at the leadership board results. And again, this is something that we did years ago. Not sure if they still do that. But during that conversation, I would try to provide them some options for the individual to think about, to include transfer to the USAR and or retirement. In some situations, if that officer was a dual status, I would ask HRO for their input on technician options also. And I agree with General Rees that we would need to treat them with dignity, honor, and thank them for their service.
All right, and then the next question, so assuming you did, how did you work together? You worked so long together, assuming you did, how did you work together to mentor and grow talent in the organization?
Well, Don, you want to?
I'll start off if you want me to, but you can.
All right, I would say this. I think the door between our offices was always open. Yeah. And I would say that I would like to think I didn't make unilateral decisions, although I'm sure Don.
Well, there was one or two. But
that we had a lot of open discussion,
yeah.
A lot of consideration of the options and the consequences, and particularly at the senior level, you got to think about the second and third order consequences of what's going to happen when you make this decision, because it's not just what's on the face of it. You're setting a lot of precedents, you're setting policy, and you need to be able to do it the right way. So when you talk about talent management, mentoring, and so on, Don was a great source to me of in-depth knowledge about the technician program that I didn't have coming into the role as a traditional guardsman, and learning the hard way through the School of Hard Knocks. He was a great support to me. So Don?
Yeah, and we did have some great conversations over the years, and General Rees was always very open to those conversations and took the time to ask for my opinion, and which I really did appreciate. So I always felt we had a great working relationship. Approximately 2-3 times a year, General Rees would start looking at reassignment opportunities for not only AGRs, but traditional and non-dual status officers for both command and staff positions, especially field grade and above. And that's where we have these great conversations. And General Rees would solicit input from other senior officers and to obtain their view.
All right. General, this one goes back to the mentee. What could or should someone do to be more mentorable?
Okay.
What's the mentee's role?
Well, I think we had a slide on that, but
Yeah.
so to kind of paraphrase that, I think you've got to be frank, you've got to be confident, you've got to speak straight from the shoulder. We're talking about the mentee now. The mentor needs to be a good listener, but the mentee needs to provide the information that the mentor can use to help. And you need to demonstrate that you're coachable. You've got to demonstrate that you're coachable. In other words, the mentee also needs to be a good listener, and that this isn't just a whine or a complaint session. I was going to use the word bitch, but it's probably over the top. This is a collaborative effort to enhance your career. It's not a whine session.
I would say always doing the right thing. Be confident with your actions. Take responsibility for your mistakes and learn from them. Be a team player. Take care of people under your supervision or command. Be forward thinking and have a very high degree of integrity.
Thank you. All right, General Rees, this one is specifically for you. It has been noted that even Tiger Woods has a coach. So in that spirit, how did you approach your mentorship role with the Chief of the National Guard?
Very carefully. So the Chief of the National Guard Bureau, first of all, General Gronwald's a very busy man. Every Adjutant General is very busy. A lot of our senior leaders are very busy people. But you take what the Chief of the Guard Bureau does, and in his role as the chief, as a role as a member of the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, you got to say that's an exponential jump up in time management and what gets done. So you've got to be, if you're a senior mentor, you can't be just hanging around. You've got to be able to make your time count. Make that face time that you get count. So you've got to get a handle on what are the interests and the problems of the chief. And you've just got a little sliver of time to do that. And then it's on you, the senior mentor, to go find the staff, the people that are responsible for that particular interest and so on within the Bureau, within the Title X program, and get the detailed, in-depth understanding of those interests or problems. Because when you come back and again you have that sliver of time to talk to the chief, you've got to make cogent, succinct presentations. And you can't be leaving the meeting with, well, what did he really mean? Or you can't figure it out. Well, we're going to take the time to hammer it out. You've got to be able to walk in and deliver those thoughts. And you need to make sure that before you leave there, in that sliver of time, that you get the guidance, the expectations, and the feedback that are necessary to continue on in your role. And probably the most important thing that I can say about this, my wonderful opportunity to work with General Hokanson, is be available when the boss is available. Because if you're not, you're going to miss an opportunity to contribute to the success of his time as chief. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Number one, this one is for you, as mentioned, longtime technician, and mentored so many of our technicians, of course. So, assuming you did, how did you approach mentorship of technicians differently than I'm sure the AGR and other MDA or DSG officers that you mentored?
It's a good question. To some degree, yes. While the principles of mentorship are basically the same, the technician program is a little different from management of AGR and MDA officers. We I tried to take into consideration not only their military, but also their civilian careers, their federal tech positions. In other words, what we call technician's job compatibility. And at times, that became a factor in some of the career decisions that were made, or considerations, I should say. And I always relied on the expertise of HRO, the Human Resource Office. They were a very important part of that process of mentoring and as far as technicians are concerned.
All right, thank you. And we do have one last question here that was submitted, but before we do that, I want to, because we just have a few minutes, want to open it up to the floor for any questions. Sergeant Major?
Sergeant Major Burleson. Question for either of you, really. Probably no surprise to you, we are facing a recruiting and retention problem. Very difficult. And in this culture of trying to recruit and retain our soldiers, a lot of the focus is about what the Guard can do for you to keep them in. So as we lead and mentor our soldiers, how do we shift that discussion from what can the Guard do for you to keep you in to what is the why? Why should you stay in that bigger picture for either of you?
Well, this is an interesting question. And certainly, Don's alluded to the fact that he's been away from the force for a certain number of years. I've certainly been away from the force directly to know exactly what's happening out there. I am concerned that perhaps we're failing in our schools and so on to address civics and what's this all about and what are the obligations. A democracy is not just a stand there and take whatever they give to you. Democracy is a participatory thing, all right? And so what I learned early on, or was important to me personally, was this business about this obligation to serve. There was a lot of discussion about universal service and the idea, okay, you're either enlist or you're going to get drafted, or should there be some alternative service out there? There were, things like the Civilian Conservation Corps and all this kind of stuff that they had back in the 1930s. Should there be universal service? Well, we've drifted away from that as we've gone into this all-volunteer force, all right? And so I would guess if you talk to the typical young person today, maybe they don't have any sense whatsoever that service in the terms of the military is important, or in terms of their role as a member of a democracy. And certainly, I think there was some mention probably by Representative Evans here in his comments about this business of service. So I think one of the things that what we may, and it may be on the shoulders of the Guard and those people that are in uniform, is to take the time, if the doors will be open to you in schools and so on, to talk about the roles and obligations of people in a democracy to serve their community, serve their nation, and the opportunities that they have to do that. And those opportunities include putting on the cloth of their nation. So I hope that's somewhere in the ballpark of what you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, I would like to just add a comment to what General Rees has indicated. He talked about civics a little bit, and a program that, just let me start off here first. I am a member of the American Legion and have been for a few years now, and I'm working with department leadership here in Oregon. And one of the things that I've noticed over the years, and I remember back in the mid-'60s when I was a little younger, Boy State used to be a big, big thing. Over the years in the state of Oregon, I'm not sure exactly what may have happened, but that trend, and also Girl State too, that trend for Boy State, because they do civics, they do learn about the government, how it works at the local and state level. High schools don't seem to be involved in that process of identifying candidates. And we've noticed a trend over the years of, like I said, downward, and we've got a couple of people that are working very, very hard now to go back out in the field, talk to high schools, and try to get this program up and running again. Last year, I believe they had like about 35, 40 students that attended Boise State, and it was held on the campus of Oregon State University. This year, those numbers are not even half that. So it gets back to what General Rees had indicated. We're not talking about the civics and how important that part is. And I think overall that helps build that character of an individual, Boy State and Girl State.
So I got one more thing. I had the other situation, which, or let me put it this way. When I was I think it was a senior in high school, John F. Kennedy got elected president, and one of the remarks that he made in his inaugural speech was, ask not what America can do for you, what can you do for America? And it was really kind of something for my generation that was very, very significant. And I think a lot of us older folks remember that. And that's the kind of thing that they need to hear. If you are a leader, you have an opportunity to speak to young folks, do this kind of thing that Don's talking about with the American Legion and so on, and you get those points across, that you will get out of democracy what you put into it. In other words, there is a reason to serve to make your country and your community better. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions?
So, sir, you have a reputation for making a lot of generals, a lot of colonels, a lot of quality, talented leaders throughout your career. When making those selections for career management, especially AGRs, it is kind of your 20, 21, 22 years and out. So there's a lot more turnover than we have right now. What value, why do it that approach opposed to what we're doing? It's a lot longer process. You see more dynamic learners or changers at that age, or?
Yeah, so there's kind of a long answer to that question. So one of the things is, I came into the role of Adjutant General from the traditional Guard. And I really didn't know much about either the AGR program or the full-time support. But I was a member of the active duty Army, so I kind of understood that larger picture. But when I was appointed, the governor had a commission. He had a commission go out and see what's right and wrong with the Guard before he selected the Adjutant General. And what they found was there was a huge gap between the field and the state headquarters. And a lot of it had to do with this business of kind of a them and us attitude. And so I was selected and I was told to go fix that. All right, so I went out, and this business that I mentioned earlier of listen to your subordinates, I spent a lot of time in sensing sessions and so on. And the big problem was, why was it a them and us attitude, was that everything was in a silo. There were fiefdoms, the 41st Brigade, there wasn't a troop command brigade at the time, but there was a silo there. There were silos in the battalions, the same thing in the Air Guard with the wings and so on. And there was no transparency. People couldn't figure out how you got promoted if you weren't in the hierarchy of that particular organization, and how did you get assigned and so on. So I went to work trying to figure that out. Now, to get around to your question is, as I developed that and I understood how to break that down, how to break down the fiefdoms, how to get people to assign people, select people and assign people across the organization, I had to get smarter about and take a more sophisticated look at the population we're dealing with. And so you end up with, okay, you've got AGRs who have rules. You've got technicians who've got rules. You've got the traditional guard who's got to deal with their civilian employment and so on. And then you've got, at that time, there was a requirement that the state employees had to be either a member of the Guard or had to be a member of the, what we knew then as the State Defense Force. And each one of them had to be managed. And you couldn't just walk in and say, well, everybody's going to be in one big pool. So I had to take a much more sophisticated approach. So to get to your point, and your question is this, I finally developed a personal philosophy that I'm trying to manage people. People want to have a career. They want to achieve retirement. And how do they get there? In the case of the traditional Guard and technicians in many respects, you're managing this simultaneously, a civilian career and a military career. But with an AGR, you're managing a situation where that individual has a military career period, and so you're not managing him to some other she or he, to some, you're actually managing not simultaneously, you're managing them sequentially. All right, so and one of the keys to getting folks promoted and so on is you have to keep the system dynamic. I mentioned this business earlier about treating people with dignity, respect, and thank you for your service, but the system needs to be dynamic. And one of the things that I learned early on is with one retirement, you get I'll call it exponential, but or geometrical. You get a geometrical progression right down. You retire one colonel, you get 3 or 4 lieutenant colonels promoted. Those 3 or 4 lieutenant colonels get promoted. You get 10, 12 majors promoted. It just goes right on down through the system. And so I took a hard line on AGRs, in particular, that when you achieve retirement age and you will retire. Now, we did have the needs of the service. We made some exceptions, but it was basically, that was the way we managed it. So other states are out running around asking for additional control grades and things like this so they can promote people and keep them around forever and ever. I took the opposite position. I said, no, I have the responsibility as the Adjutant General to run this organization and to keep it dynamic and keep the promotion flow, allow people to come up through the ranks to get to go where they need to go. Now, I realize there are a lot of AGRs in here right now. They're grinding their teeth. They don't like that, okay? But that was my approach, and I think it worked out very well. So now, Don also mentioned this thing about going, there are other ways to help people who wanted to continue on in uniform. And the prime example I'll give you right now is Dan Hokanson. Dan Hokanson hit 20 and 21 years in the Oregon Guard. Basically, it was, Dan, you are through here, but I will help you. Go into the Title 10 program, take one of these other positions, and guess what? He ends up as the Chief of the National Guard Bureau and on the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Right? So my point is that the responsibility is not the responsibility. If you're going to have this system work, you've got to manage each of these segments: AGRs, technicians, traditional state employees. Hope that answered your question.
All right, and with that, Adam Goulet's question, we have actually reached the end of our time. Gentlemen, on behalf of the entire association and everybody gathered here, again, thank you so much for your time and being here to be our guest speakers. Thank you again.
You bet. All right. Thank you.
We'll get this down there for you. Nobody leaves without a coffee mug, right? We can't let you leave without, without a small token.
Appreciate it.
Thank you again, sir.
You bet. Appreciate it.